Welcome back to yet another week of NFL Power Rankings. Week 13 is now in the books. All 32 NFL teams played this past weekend. We learned a lot. Some teams really beginning to shine as contenders. Some teams obviously going the other way around. But overall, a very exciting week of NFL football has occurred, and we're now on to the final 5 weeks of the season. So it is time to re-rank the teams from 1 to 32. Before we get into it, I want to make sure that you guys hit that like button, subscribe, and share with your friends. I'm trying to get to 250, and at 250, I'm going to bring more subscribers to talk about their favorite teams onto the channel, as well as I'm going to be releasing more content here in the playoff push. Expect a video sometime later this week, just talking about the Week 14 games before they happen, and let's get into it. At number 32, I still have the New York Giants. And New York just has been playing their best football. On Thanksgiving, they lose to the Cowboys in a game where Drew Lock was forced into the starting role a couple hours before kickoff. And he didn't have that bad of a game. He had a nice run early on, got the ball moving on the ground, but never really got it going through the air. And Dallas beat them because Dallas just got it going on the ground and got it going through the air. And it was just a complete football game that the Giants can't beat. They have not been able to play a complete football game pretty much the entire season. And once again, with New York, it's still on to the draft and who's going to be the quarterback in New York next season. At number 31, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're 2-10, but once again, this has been the theme of their season. They play competitive football games against good teams. This week it was against the Texans, where they lost Trevor Lawrence early on, and Mac Jones had a decent second half to keep them in it, but they could not get it done. And this Jacksonville team, it was just an unfortunate season for them. They're lucky there's only 5 more weeks to go, and that it can't really get much worse from here for them. But for Jacksonville, they're definitely a team on the watch to draft Travis Hunter, potentially first overall in this year's draft. At number 30, I have the New York Jets. They dropped to 3-9, and this is a team that at this point in the season nobody expected to be 3-9, and they were beginning to play like the team they should in the first half of this game against the Seahawks. I was there and I saw their offense clicking, that Rodgers-Adams connection really was working, and they were getting turnovers on special teams, and they jumped out to an early lead, and then Rodgers threw a pick six, and then the Jets just went stagnant from there. They could not really do anything after that. They ended up losing a game that they definitely should have won, and that's been the theme of this Jets season. They have not been able to win football games that they should, or they haven't been able to play good enough to win football games. And that's why they sit at 3-9, and that's why they're in as much turmoil as they are right now. So they're at number 30. One of several teams in this ranking that are moving up with losses. I thought the Raiders played their best football game of the season this past week against the Chiefs, where Brock Bowers went off. He is making a case to be Offensive Rookie of the Year. As a tight end, he's close to that 1,000-yard mark. The defense, they made the stops that they needed to. It's just the Raiders blew it right at the end, where Aiden O'Connell, who had been playing one of his best football games of his career, made a mistake at the end of the game. Him and the center really weren't connected, and that's what led to the fumble that gave the Chiefs the victory. But it was just improvement out of Vegas, which in a lost season, that's what you want to be seeing. And this is once again a team that really cares which quarterback they are able to draft in April. So for Vegas, good improvements. I moved them up 2 spots. The New England Patriots had a chance to win their game against the Colts. Unfortunately, at the end of the game, the Colts get the 2-point conversion and win. They almost won off a 68-yard field goal at the end of the game, which would have been crazy. But New England played a solid football game, but they weren't able to get it done. And this team drops to 3-10 and are eliminated from playoff contention. So New England, once again, like I said with Jacksonville, this is a team that obviously wants to get a weapon like Travis Hunter. But at this point, New England finally get to their bye week in Week 14, and in the last 4 weeks, it's just about getting Drake May the most playing time and most experience you can before next season is a reset, because this season is obviously over. But for New England, I'm liking what I see out of them, but there could be a bit better. The Tennessee Titans got absolutely destroyed in the first quarter of the football game against the Commanders, and they could not recover from there. They went down 28-0 early on, and obviously you're not coming back from that. And the Titans just didn't play good on defense at all in this game. Offensively, there wasn't much there until it didn't really even matter. But Westbrook-Ikhine is having a great season, and nobody's talking about it. He is a potential great weapon for Tennessee next season. I don't know what Tennessee does in the draft, but I think it's either address offensive line or potentially add something onto that defense. So for Tennessee, another team that's looking onto the draft. The Bears continue to lose in the most heartbreaking ways possible, and I moved them down a spot, but Matt Eberflus is now gone. They've lost 6 in a row, and it's just not looking great for Chicago. Caleb Williams is playing good, but this team loses on blocked field goals, Hail Marys. And this one, they could have taken the timeout to tie the game or take the attempt to tie the game, and they just forgot. Like, that cannot happen if you're an NFL team. And Chicago at 4-8, their season is over. But once again, as I said with the Patriots, it's about getting their rookie quarterback the most experience possible before the reset for next season. The Jerry Jeudy revenge game went well offensively. Defensively, it did not. It comes down to that Jameis Winston threw 2 pick sixes, which ended up leading to their 41-32 loss in what was a very entertaining Monday night game. Jameis Winston threw for 497 yards and 4 touchdowns, but the 3 interceptions really costly to them potentially having a shot to win this game. Jerry Jeudy had 235 yards, the best game of his career, and that's what you like to see out of Cleveland. I know their season is over, but getting guys like Jerry Jeudy, potentially some momentum to build off of for next season, is something that if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, you would like to see. And the fact that they're pretty much competitive in all these games since Winston's been starting is very good for them, and that's why I've moved them up 2 spots to 25. At number 24, I have the Carolina Panthers. They stay at 24, but I continue to gain more respect for this team. Bryce Young is showing week by week what his potential really was, and this stretch has been extremely beneficial for Carolina. They now know that Bryce Young is going to be here next year because the last 2 losses have not really been on Bryce Young at all. He played his best game, and it comes down to late mistakes. This week, it's a fumble and field goal range, which allows the Bucs to drive down the field and win the game. But Carolina, 3-9 with their division, their season isn't over. But unless they win out, it really is over. But Carolina, love the improvement out of them. I keep them at 24. New Orleans, that high-powered offense that we saw early on has completely reversed. They were just offensively stagnant against the Rams. They could not score. They end up losing the game, and that loss kind of puts the nail in the coffin on the season, even though, as I just said with the Panthers, their division is very winnable with an 8-9 or 9-8 record. So if the Saints were to win out, they potentially have a chance to make it, but I'm not liking what I see out of them at all. Their offense just did not perform defensively. They're playing sound, but it needs to be a bit better. And what we saw before their bye week needs to kind of return if they want their season to somewhat stay alive. So I moved them down 1 spot to 23. I do not understand what's going on with the Cincinnati Bengals. They continue to lose football games, and they should be winning pretty much 90% of their games. They're scoring over 30 points pretty much almost every game, and they are 4-8. And it's because their defense is the worst defense in the NFL right now. They allow 44 points in the loss to the Steelers. They lose 44-38, and their season is practically over unless they win out and a couple teams lose a couple games down the stretch. But for Cincinnati, it's what we're seeing out of them right now is kind of what you saw out of the Saints in the 2010s. They have everything they need on offense. Their defense just needs to pick it up. And Cincinnati, I would heavily invest in defense in this upcoming draft for next season. Look at the Dallas Cowboys stringing a couple of wins together. I know this one on Thanksgiving was against the Giants, but they come back into the point where their season isn't over yet. They're at 5-7, and Cooper Rush is playing pretty well as the starter. Rico Dowdle had an amazing game for over 100 yards and a touchdown in the Thanksgiving victory. Defensively, they had a pick six, which really helped them win that game. And Dallas, they're playing better than they were the past 5 or 6 weeks before this little two-game stretch against divisional opponents, and they'll look to continue it on Monday night against the Cincinnati Bengals. But for right now, I move them up 2 spots to 21. Francisco 49ers season has just gone downhill very quickly. They get destroyed again on Sunday night against the Bills. They lose McCaffrey for the season, and they lost Jordan Mason for 4 weeks. And the injuries continue to pile up. Fred Warner's playing hurt. You're missing Ayuk for the year. Purdy's dealing with an injury. And pretty much what happened to the Niners after they made the Super Bowl in 2019, that 2020 season, it's pretty much a mirror of this year. They're going to miss the playoffs more than likely. They're last place in the NFC West. And it's just not looking good in San Francisco. They're likely going to need to win out to make the playoffs, and I do not think that's happening. But I keep them at number 20. At number 19, I have the Miami Dolphins. I dropped them 3 spots. They won 3 games in a row to go from 2-6 to 5-6. But on Thanksgiving, they just couldn't do really anything in the first half, and the game was over at halftime against the Packers. And it continues that narrative. Tua said he wanted to stop the narrative that he could not play in the cold, but he plays in the cold, and he doesn't do anything until it doesn't matter. He throws for 360 yards in this one, but as I just said, most of that was in garbage time. I like the play out of Jonnu Smith. He's playing like a top 5 tight end in the NFL right now, which is something positive out of what has been an average to bad Miami Dolphins football season. And for them, they really need to win 4 out of 5 or win out to make the playoffs. But this Dolphins team, out of the 5-7 teams I've been talking about, probably has the best chance to do so. And it begins this week against the Jets. So Miami, I've dropped them 3 spots to 19. The LA Rams continue to stick in the playoff picture. They get the win over the Saints, where they did not have to do that much to win this game. It was kind of more of a Saints mistake game that helped them win. But the Rams, they get it done when it matters on offense. They get their touchdowns late. And on defense, they were pretty much shut down the entire game. And from here on out to make the playoffs, I would likely say they would need to go 10-7 in the NFC. They sit 6-6. And the best path for the Rams is to win the division. And I don't know how that's going to happen, depending on how they play. But for the Rams, definitely season still alive at 6-6, but I have them at 18. At number 17, I have the Indianapolis Colts. And what a late touchdown to save their season. Likely if they drop to 5-8 there, it is pretty much over. But they go into their bye week 6-7. And Richardson just needs to play a lot better. 100 yards and 2 interceptions and below 50% completion is not going to cut it against the Broncos, who they have after their bye week for their biggest game of the season. If they lose that game, their season is over. If they win, they're right back in the race for a playoff spot. But for the Colts, it's just about offensive execution that will help them potentially get to the playoffs. But for now, I have them at 17. At number 16, I have the Atlanta Falcons, and they dropped 2 spots, 2-16, and they've officially blown that division lead. That it looked like they were going to win the division early on in the season, and Kirk Cousins has been playing terrible, to say the least. He has 6 interceptions, no touchdowns in his last couple games. This game, he throws for 4 interceptions in what was a very winnable game against the LA Chargers. And where do the Falcons go from here? They have all the weapons to be a playoff team. It's just about, can they win the games that they should be winning? And that's what they just haven't been doing these last couple games. And that's what might force them out of the playoffs. But that comfortable lead they once had is now gone. And I have them at 16. Arizona played a really close game with the Minnesota Vikings this past week, but in the end, they barely lose this one. But I like the Cardinals' performance. They kind of held that Minnesota offense in check for most of the game until late. They let Minnesota get back into it, and then Minnesota won the game. but offensively, they just need to finish drives more. Early on, they scored a lot of field goals, and they only got into the end zone once. If they can finish drives, this Cardinals team is going to make the playoffs, and they could potentially do damage in the playoffs. It's just, can they finish drives, and can they get consistent play out of their defense? And this Cardinals team has proven this season that they can. So that's why I haven't really moved them as much, and I keep them at 15. Tampa Bay, after dropping 4 in a row, have now won 2 in a row, and they're back at 500. And this was not an easy football game to win. Carolina, they're better than their 3-9 record suggests. Bryce Young, as I mentioned before, played a great game, but Tampa Bay is able to squeak it out, mostly off their backfield, where Bucky Irving is playing the best football he's played in his career the last couple of games. Rachaad White had a big run in overtime to clinch the game, and Sean Tucker is playing great and getting into the end zone. And Tampa Bay, they just are a team that has the power to get into the playoffs. When they execute, they can, and they've proven these last 2 weeks that they're executing at the right time, and I think they can get into the postseason the way they're playing and win the NFC South. At number 13, I have the Seattle Seahawks. As I mentioned with the Jets before, I was at this game. I saw all their special teams mistakes early on, but they're able to get it done, largely off their offensive play at the end of the game. They get it done with the late Charbonnet touchdown to go up 26-21, which was the final. Their defense really was put in bad positions for most of this game by their special teams, and in the second half, they just played a perfect ball game. A key fumble late in the third helped them win the game. So Seattle, they're a game up in the NFC West right now, and if they can win their football games, if they can win 2 or 3 more games, they'll be in the playoffs. But at 7-5, I never thought Seattle would be here, but they are, and they're back to playing that football they were playing at the beginning of the season. At number 12, I have the LA Chargers, and this week they get back in the win column, largely due to their defensive play. They get 4 interceptions in this game and hold the Atlanta offense to really nothing, and that's what's gotten the LA Chargers to where they are. They are a win or 2 away from basically clinching their spot in the playoffs. They're likely going to need 9 or 10 wins, and they're 8-4 right now, and it's looking pretty good in LA. And I'm liking potentially Jim Harbaugh for Coach of the Year because I really thought this Chargers team was not going to do much this year, and they've been a pleasant surprise. Outside the top 10, I have the Houston Texans, and they're barely squeaking out wins. This is a team that has the talent to be destroying teams like Jacksonville, and they just haven't. They haven't been playing their best football, and their bye comes at the best possible time for them because now they can reset, and if they're going to make a deep run in the AFC this year, it starts with gaining momentum against teams like the Chiefs down the stretch, who they do play. And the Houston Texans, it's largely because their offense did not really do anything in the first half. Their defense held on till late, and they barely squeaked out the win, but Houston, obvious concern there. At number 10, I have the Washington Commanders. They remain inside the top 10 because there's some very good teams around them, but a dominant win over the Titans where they put it away after the first quarter. Jayden Daniels got back to that play that we saw out of him a couple weeks ago. Terry McLaurin, Brian Robinson, that whole offense played well. The defense was shut down, and then when it didn't matter, they didn't have to be as good. And I'm just liking the play out of the Commanders. They're another team that are 1 or 2 wins away from basically clinching their spot in the playoffs, and I think they'll do so. So, Washington, good job with the win this week. They remain at number 10. At number 9, I have the Denver Broncos, who, in a shootout on Monday night, they get the win, largely because of their defense. Their defense had 2 pick sixes, and they only won by 9 points, which proves that those 2 pick sixes were extremely valuable in this one. As for the offense, Bo Nix had some beautiful throws in this game. They had great play all around. And if their defense was a little bit more locked down, we would have been talking about this Denver team in a completely different light after last night. And right now, Bo Nix, is likely going to lead this team to the playoffs. They go into their bye 8-5, and they play their main contender for that last spot, the Colts, in Week 15. If they get the win there, it's going to begin to look pretty secure for Denver to break that playoff drought. At number 8, I have the Baltimore Ravens, and finally they just could not get it done on offense, and they got exposed. That's what Ravens fans were saying, at least from what I saw. And in this one, their offense never really got it going. Justin Tucker was missing kicks, and they just dropped this one to the Eagles. And for this Ravens team, the bye week is coming at a good time for them, as if this Ravens team wants to potentially beat a team like the Chiefs in the playoffs, it starts with gaining momentum, just as I said with the Texans. Two teams in very similar spots, and I dropped them from 5 to 8 this week. Pittsburgh with another statement win, and this whole season it was mainly their defense. Their defense was playing great, and when their defense doesn't play great, they're probably not going to win the game. Today was one of those days, and they won because their offense just had an incredible game. Russell Wilson had his best game of the year, his best game in years. And this Pittsburgh team, if they get similar production, it doesn't have to be 44 points. If you get 30-plus points from a Steelers offense, the Steelers team could potentially win a Super Bowl. That's to the point of how they're playing right now. Once again, Mike Tomlin gets another winning season, make that 18 in a row now for him, and just getting great play at the right times. And Pittsburgh is on watch in the AFC. At number 6, there is the Green Bay Packers, who play another dominant football game. And similar to last year's team, they're playing their best football in the second half of the year. And for the Packers, they have a huge game against the Lions this upcoming Thursday. If they win that game, they're still in contention for the North. If they lose, that will pretty much lock them into being a wild card team. And as for that Dolphins game, Jordan Love didn't turn over the ball again, which was huge in the win. And Josh Jacobs just continues to be that workhorse back for the Green Bay Packers. So I have them at number 6. At number 5, I have the Minnesota Vikings, who move up 1. They are now 10-2. They get the late comeback win against the Arizona Cardinals, where Sam Darnold came up clutch in the right moments. Aaron Jones had the game-winning touchdown. And the Vikings continue to win football games. This team is going to ride that defense to potentially getting playoff wins. And let's see where it can go from here. For the Vikings, they would love a Lions loss in the next couple weeks here, because that puts them back in contention for the division. And Minnesota looking like a serious Super Bowl contender as of right now. That's why I have them at 5. At number 4, I have the Philadelphia Eagles, and they played a great defensive game against the Baltimore Ravens. They shut down the run, which was the Ravens' offense main focus, and that's how they're going to beat a team like the Ravens. Saquon Barkley plays another great game. He's on pace still to break that rushing yards record, and let's see what he can do in these final 5 games here. Philadelphia, another team that would love a Detroit loss to get into that 1 seed spot, and I think they can do it. This Philadelphia team is a team that can definitely win out, and they are serious threats to win the Super Bowl this year, and I have them at number 4. Once again, Kansas City wins a game that they really shouldn't have, and this 11-1 team just continues to win. They're not playing the flashiest football. They're not playing their best football, and we know that they've won 3 Super Bowls in the last few years. And that's what good teams do. They win games that they're not supposed to. In this game, the defense came up huge in the end with that fumble recovery that clinched the game. And down the stretch, it's just about not slipping up. If they finish 16-1, they will likely be they will be the 1 seed in the AFC. If you slip up once in Buffalo, the football they're playing right now, I'll get to them in a second, you likely finish as the 2 seed. But Kansas City playing pretty well, even though they're not showing for it. At number 2, I have the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen is your current leader for MVP. He throws for a touchdown, catches a touchdown, and runs for one in what was an amazing performance by him. They absolutely destroyed the 49ers. Their defense let nothing happen at all. And Buffalo is looking like one of the most complete teams in the NFL. And they're going to have a big test once again when they play the Lions in Week 15. But from here on out, Buffalo, if they don't slip up and Kansas City does, they end up as that 1 seed, and that's what would be huge for Buffalo and their path to potentially winning a Super Bowl. So that's why I have them at number 2. At number 1, I have the Detroit Lions, and they played dominant football in the first half. In the second half, the Bears get back into it, but the Lions are able to squeak it out. This team is now 11-1, and on top of the NFC still, they've won 10 straight. They look completely unstoppable at this point, and it comes down to the play of that defense. They have a ton of injuries, but they continue to barely allow any touchdowns. They had a streak of 10 straight quarters leading into this game that they didn't allow a touchdown, which proves how well this defense is playing, and that offense with Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Sonic and Knuckles, the running back duo, they're playing amazing. So Detroit, easily number 1 team in the NFL right now, and probably your Super Bowl favorite at this point. But that will do it for this week's Power Rankings. Remember, be on watch for that video talking about the Week 14 games that should drop either tomorrow or Thursday. And I'm actually going to release the video. And make sure to like, subscribe, tell your friends about these videos, and I'll see you in next week's Power Rankings.